so nice we have the same hobby, like to cook.
大家好，我是 Ryanstorm， 这里是中国见。
Excuse me, can you take a look?
Sure.
You can control the whole thing moving like this?
Yeah.
Holy
so
shit.
when you move a chicken's body, the head stays in one spot.
Yeah.
It's like that. But then also I can do this with it.
Holy shit. You're a professional YouTuber?
Yeah.
YouTuber.
Well, not.
How much does that thing cost? How much lens cost? How much the camera cost?
I don't know if I want to say. Chinatown is the beating heart of the Asian American community in Boston. The largest and only such named Chinatown in New England, and the second most densely populated in the United States, dwarfed only by New York City.
Well, besides being the best,
to be honest, Boston Chinatown is the best. Here I go.
Love it.
This is where it all started.
Yeah.
This is the oldest space in Boston where the Chinese population settled. And it's very immigrant based.
we are the third largest in the U.S. We don't talk about Canada because we're American. Forget that they have 3 giant Chinatowns. Sorry, Canada. We are far behind New York and San Francisco in terms of our square footage and population.
New York Chinatown, it's good. It's way, it's a little bit messier.
If you go to DC's Chinatown, it's just a gate.
Almost did air quotes there. I saw that.
There's like a T-Mobile store and a Mexican place. Go to Northern Virginia for Chinese food. You go to another suburb.
Philadelphia Chinatown is so old at night. Probably around 9 o'clock, no restaurants are open. Like, are they even Chinese? They're not doing business, right?
We have a really rich residential and cultural neighborhood here.
It's a small area. So once you've been here for a number of years, you kind of know who's who are the main players in Chinatown, the main organizations, what they do, and you support them.
And despite the name, Chinatown isn't necessarily just Chinese. Chinatown has always been a hotbed for the Asian American culture of Boston and New England. At times, the Vietnamese population of the neighborhood could actually rival that of the Chinese one.
It is a fairly diverse mix. I would say much more diverse than in the early immigration days when it was almost 100% Cantonese.
Most people come from southern China, but there's also Chinese from Vietnam, sprinkling off Chinese from other places as well.
Some small pocket of Fujianese, Toisanese, an older language similar to Cantonese.
I mean, even in China alone, there are over 50 languages being spoken.
Most of the Mandarin speakers are later immigrants, most academics, and then we have folks from Taiwan as well.
The actual settling of Boston's Chinatown is something of a legend, but we do have an idea of how it went down. Theories would actually direct us back to the Chinese immigrants who came to San Francisco in search of wealth from the gold rush and opportunities from the construction of the Intercontinental Railroad. But then what brought them from San Francisco all the way to Boston? To put it simply, fear. It started with a labor shortage in North America, and the new, quite industrious Chinese immigrants ended up taking the blame for this. This eventually escalated to the San Francisco riots of 1877, where over the course of 3 days, Caucasian citizens of the city attacked and brutalized Chinese workers in the area. And later on, there was the enaction of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which barred new Chinese immigrants from entering the country as a way of quelling discontent. The Exclusion Act remained in effect from 1882 to 1943.
In the early days, during the Exclusion Act era, it was only the savvy Chinese immigrants who realized they had no political say because they weren't citizens and they couldn't vote, but they pooled their money and hired lawyers to bring a case challenging the Exclusion Act. And if they had not done that, all of the cases today that challenge anti-immigration kind of legislation, they would have no precedent to stand on.
Many Chinese immigrants fled the West Coast to the East Coast to escape violence and discrimination, at which point they started settling and building Chinatown.
Constantly I'm dodging the monotony of dealing with the world and its awful lot of autonomy and figuring out what what I need to be, what I need to see, what I need to eat, how I shouldn't drink, how I gotta sleep.
Chinatown at its inception was actually much more of a bachelor community. This was partially due to the Chinese Exclusion Act, like straight up not letting them come over, but a few financial and cultural reasons also deterred them from wanting to bring their wives or children over with them.
And most people here, by the way, they speak more than one language. It's just not English. Most of them speak a regional dialect and or Cantonese or Mandarin, and then they have a few words of English, but they're not conversant in English. They don't have to be for most of their life.
Do you feel like this is an authentic representation of Chinese culture or like a very Americanized version of it?
I think it's pretty Chinese.
Chinese culture is very diverse. Different regions have different practices, variations of different traditions. Song, music, dance, language, way of life, dress, all of it.
All Chinese people would first say they're Chinese. Amongst themselves, they would say we're Cantonese, or we're from Guangdong, Sichuan, Fujian.
As an overseas Chinese, I practice Chinese culture in different ways from, say, somebody from the mainland as well. So it's not monolithic by any means. All very different.
And everybody believes their food is the best, their women are the prettiest. So there's that kind of rivalry that goes along. And they would say probably China is better and Chinese are better. But then amongst themselves, they would say, but our food is really the best.
Like all the food and how the buildings and how they arrange all those buildings and restaurants is pretty Chinese.
Construction-wise, Boston's Chinatown holds a very unique aesthetic, helping it stand apart from Boston's more European, Victorian, or colonially influenced hoods, while still retaining some of that New England sensibility. The smaller, neighboring, and once flourishing leather district boasted a key source of jobs when the Chinese immigrants first arrived, once boasting a booming tactile and fabric industry. Matter of fact, I'm going to be lumping the leather district into this video too, because even to Boston city officials, this is considered to be part of Chinatown.
I hear some people now talking about combining these neighborhoods. The truth is that neither of our neighborhoods have a whole lot of political clout independently, and I think that's been the detriment of both communities.
Today, with the fall of the textile industry in the West, it's become a fancy home for loft factory-style apartments and condominiums.
It's changed a lot. The city still thinks of us as a bunch of artists, hippies, squatters, and they don't realize that we have families now.
The Leather District is also a host to a decent number of Asian American stores. I think what's behind me is a hot pot place. The South Street Diner, a historic and 24-hour diner, is technically in the Leather District as well. But if there's one thing you should know about the Chinatown area is that there is no shortage of options for food, my dude. So I'm gonna have to save this guy for later and give some love to our Chinese American cuisine. What is usually the main reason you'd come to Chinatown?
Mainly for food.
Thompson with the 3, but I'm Davis in the post. Y'all been worried about me, but I'm out doing the most. Come on, tally-vous, Vate fair food, why you gotta know? Wake up broke and say you rich, you faker than a wrestle pro.
If you're trying to find a definitive list of the best places to eat in Chinatown, then I have good news and bad news. The bad news is that I'm in no way an expert. The other bad news is that every single list of the best places to eat in Chinatown is gonna vary slightly from one another, which to me is way better than the alternative. Instead of Chinatown having like just 5 good restaurants, it is packed, quite literally wall to wall packed, with dozens of restaurants that are probably super good, of which I've only tried a couple and liked all of them, which is to be expected with a very small neighborhood that has about 6,000 people living in it.
What's this place called? Banh Mi Huang Kuo, or Kue. Banh Mi Huang Kue. All right, this is your first time having banh mi, right? Yeah. Right. I've had other banh mi's before. This is a massive roll. I'm gonna take a big freaking chomp. The meat's really good. I feel like a seagull. What is this, thyme?
It might be either that or cilantro or parsley. I think it's cilantro.
This is awesome. There's like cucumber, cilantro, carrot, pork. This is like surprisingly healthy. And it's $6. It is $6 for this. Look at how big this thing is.
Expect plenty of restaurant cut-ins as I dip in and out of different places in the neighborhood.
Hello Moon is a Cantonese dim sum place. I love the shrimp dumplings. The shrimp crystal dumplings is my favorite.
It's always about the food. We greet each other by saying, what have you eaten today? Special foods with special tales for every holiday. Food is very prominent and it's a way to express love. Because of years, centuries of poverty and hunger. We don't say I love you. We say, here's a perfect orange for you that I've just cut up this morning for you.
Zornak and I decided to try out the breakfast side of Chinatown. His pick was the Baobao Bakery.
I originally was gonna ask for a pork bun. I didn't have any of that beef, so I'm
got these little bad boys. Meat. I've got the meat. And I also got scallion, mayo, pork croquette. I'm very hungry.
He was very hungry. For my pick, I wanted to hit Chinatown's less restaurant-packed west side, gunning for May's Cake House. Very Chinese and very affordable.
Yeah, it's on.
Focus.
Yes, it's in focus.
Look at this sloppy thing. It's literally just like a big squishy cake. It's like a rice white cake, I think it said. White rice cake. That's different. It's pretty good though.
Savory?
No, it's sweet. Kind of green tea, kind of molasses. Actually, yeah, that's green tea. So unfortunately, I have to kill this rat.
No.
I like that. The mouse is made out of butter. Very soft and squishy, yet like ever so slightly dry.
That's how coffee cake should be.
What are a few of your favorite restaurants in Chinatown?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Well, we're really lucky. I mean, we have pretty much anything that you might be hankering for.
I like Gaga seafood. I like Peach Farm.
Sweet waffles on a stick and boba places. We have great boba places.
The place I went to also just so happens to sell these little waffles, these little waffle things. It's really good.
New ramen place, Waku Waku, which is great. A Taiwan cafe on Oxford Street, which is fabulous.
I like the Dumpling Cafe. Penang restaurant can be good too.
Excuse me, do you guys know where I can find a place called Penang? Okay, it might not be here anymore, thank you. Oh, your first time, sorry.
You go to Halo Moon for dim sum, which is now Food Opera on Essex Street.
Taiwan Taste used to be here, but I think what happened to Taiwan Taste?
I love our street vendor Tom, who's on Beach Street. We always stop and get some fruit there. Today we got the juiciest, sweetest tangerine, giant, like the size of a baseball. It's delicious.
Even the ones I don't mention doesn't mean they're not good. These just happen to be the one that I like to frequent.
Zoranok's hunger still could not be satiated, so he decided to swipe some noodles for his drive home.
So I got noodles, dumplings, 4 dumplings.
Yeah.
2 sides of chicken. I mean, when I'm talking noodles, I'm talking like, this thing is heavy. And a water bottle, $8.50.
Give the restaurant a shout out.
Ding Ho fast food takeout.
Nice.
As I took my own lunch at the Cantonese-style Boober Cha-Cha, I recruited the assistance of Hobo Mitch to help me record. He only asked to be paid in food. By the way, Zoranok really liked his noodles.
What am I guess I'll just make a plate. What's this place called again?
BURBS. Dude, I saw it and then my phone died.
Alright, I'm gonna take a big ass. There's like, there's mushroom here. I love mushroom. That's really good.
It's really
I
good.
mix both of them into like one dish because that's how I roll.
Yeah.
But this is really good.
Do I keep Dude, when do I stop? I want to eat.
Oh, I love scallions, dude. My girlfriend,
Is a scallion?
yeah, she grows.
How you like it?
Very good.
Very good?
It's really good.
Sweet. I wish we remembered the name. What's the name of this restaurant?
Did you hit the button?
I hit the button.
Does it say record?
Yes, it says record.
Oh wow, that's a lot of pork. I'm used to like there being more vegetables than pork.
Yeah.
This is mostly just pork. I'm also not gonna double dip because they only gave us one of these. I'll dip my half bit dumpling into your sauce thing too.
Okay.
Good though.
There's a lot more to do here than just eat, though. For instance, there's also grocery stores, massage places and salons, gift shops, cell phone stores and fabric and clothing stores, karaoke, and a fallout shelter. Being so close to downtown, there is also the Kung Fu and DVD store, which also happens to sell weed accessories right in downtown, black-owned. In February, there's the Lunar New Year Parade, where people gather in droves to celebrate.
We are actually the first all-Asian women's Lion and Dragon Dance troupe. The name of the organization is Ganguok Asian Women's Lion and Dragon Dance Troupe. I am the founder and the Sifu.
Sifu, what is that?
Sifu means teacher. I founded the troupe in 1998. I grew up in Malaysia. I had always been interested in martial arts and was never really given a chance to learn martial arts as a young person. When I came to the United States, I learned some martial arts, but when my teacher left, I decided to look for another school, another class. But they were also male-dominated. One evening, I was at an event and saw a line dance close-up. It's something that I've seen all my life, but then when I looked at it this time with different eyes, I thought, wow, this is something that I can do. It's martial arts based, so why don't I get my Asian women friends to get together and start a group?
Awesome.
I see making too much noise with all the squeaking.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
It's just your chair going squeak, squeak. Our mission is to provide Asian women with the opportunity to learn and to perform this art which was traditionally forbidden to women. And also to give Asian women the opportunity to build community and to support each other. I believe that if you push yourself physically, you're also pushing yourself emotionally and psychologically too. Women in general are not encouraged to push ourselves physically, so if you can do that, you're getting over emotional, psychological barriers as well and be able to live a bigger life. We practice right here in Chinatown and we perform all over the state. The significance of the line dance is to bring good luck and to dispel any kind of bad luck and drive it away. Every line dance has what we call a eating of the greens or a choi chang, where the lions will eat some symbolic objects. During Chinese New Year, what you see as we go from store to store is the lions will eat lettuce and oranges. Oranges signify gold and lettuce signifies money, green. And when the lion eats it and throws it out, it is basically sharing the prosperity and the good luck with the store owners as well as all the audience around. That's why we go from store to store to bring good luck and prosperity to each store. Because this is the year of the tiger, my husband Ken made tiger heads and we performed the tiger dance, which we choreographed ourselves.
Oh, that's so cool. Thanks to its location, Chinatown actually has the best transit accessibility in the city. Commuting to Chinatown is a breeze. You either take the bus or the train straight to South Station, and then just walk to the left out the main doors. You can also take the Silver Line right over here, or over the Tufts Medical, which is right next to it. You can take the Orange Line straight to Chinatown, where it has its own named stop, as well as the Tufts Medical, where there's a tertiary stop. Driving here is kind of a pain, though. Lots of winding one-way streets. Just walk it. You'll enjoy it more on the ground. Just because of where I come in from, I actually take the Green Line to Boylston and then just walk over.
I don't really lived in this area, but I did a lot of visits, especially when I was living in Fenway area, so Chinatown is really reachable.
I just got done with the Chinatown tour today, and that is one of the main ways that I bring people into Chinatown and introduce them to Chinatown. Cover not only food and good places to eat and what's the culture behind the food, but also the culture of the neighborhood and the challenges the neighborhood face. I'm half Japanese and married into a Chinese family. I feel like I have the opportunity to sort of bridge cultures for people, to help introduce people to parts of the culture that are not necessarily that apparent or that opaque to people who are outside the community. I've been a lawyer and I've been a trainer, and I love engaging with and teaching people, so it felt like a natural fit. I'm a big fan of the motto, do what you can, where you are with what you've got. The needs in the world are huge right now. We can't solve everything as an individual, but I can do a lot in Chinatown. People come to my tour, it's often, I think, with the idea we're going to learn some new places to go eat. Maybe we'll learn a little bit about the food. When you read my reviews and talk to people who've taken my tours, they leave feeling like they really understand and appreciate the value of this community, the history, the culture. At the core, people understand that there's a lot to admire and respect about Chinatown. It's not just about who makes the best this dish or that dish. Boston Chinatown Tours is now my business. Fan Chinatown is now my 501c3. Our logo has 4 ginkgo leaves in a fan, so it kind of looks like a 4-leaf clover, if you will, so kind of reminiscent of Boston. We'll be working on food security and restaurant security, restaurant survival, as well as arts and nurturing art. And I'm doing some cooking classes still, but I'm kind of doing that more private style. Even though I've lived here for 20 years and people know me from my tours, I've been very, very grateful to have a couple of the grandpas come and tap me on the shoulder and tell my guests she's a good teacher. We love her. I mean, teacher is the highest honor you could give in Chinese society.
Around the gates, locals flock just about every day to just test their skills with chess, checkers, or cards, or take a walk through the Chinatown Public Garden and discuss the meaning of life. I love stuff like this. It's one of the few holdovers of the old Boston BURBS spirit.
This is so under nerves. This looks so Chinese. I didn't say anything like that in Philadelphia, but I did in New York. Kind of more authentic.
The gate itself was actually sent over as a gift from the government of China, as recognition of the unification and harmony between Boston and China's populations, one of many in the United States. There is some irony to that gate existing as a welcoming beacon, however, as Chinatown in Boston has been in a constant struggle to maintain its place within the city. A centralized location once viewed as dirty is now seen as desirable with our recent migration back to cities. Chinatown in Boston in particular actually has the highest proportion of white residents of all the northeastern Chinatowns. Now, a diverse population isn't necessarily a bad thing, but the problem is the means by which that came about happening. Chinatown fell victim to Boston's urban renewal projects. It hardly got the worst of it, but did not get the best of it. Chinatown, since its inception, has been in a near constant struggle to maintain its place within the city.
Pushing, but I'm back 100 feet. Made a library of sounds, numbers deplete. Every turn I see defeat. I'm on my own, broke, begging fans so I can eat.
In the late 1950s, the westward expansion of 90 West, the Mass Pike, brought with it the division and upending of several cities in Massachusetts beyond just Boston. This will not be the last we hear of it.
Inconvenience to property owners and cost to the builders were minimized by building wherever possible through worthless land, such as this.
When they decided to improve access to the highway, they took away 50% of the residential housing of Chinatown.
50%?
50%. Where we're standing now, these small little row houses behind you, are very typical of what most of this area looked like before the city granted highway access and raised much of the housing.
Chinatown and the Leather District opened the gate to Boston from several highway ramps, making their borders essentially an overlap of exhaust fumes.
The state changed the path of 93, so it dumps out right on our street. So cars come flying off of 93. The other day, I almost got hit on Atlantic Ave, but the cars don't look for a stop sign there.
In the 1960s, Tufts Medical relocated their office to Chinatown and seared into the center of the neighborhood to expand their Boston facility, at the behest of sacrificing even more residential real estate.
Originally, that was a tough pill for people to swallow here because they took a lot of the residential housing away to build the facility.
In its defense, the property they initially built over was an abandoned garment factory, and Tufts today seems to double back on this and is attempting at least to create a good relationship with the people of Chinatown, going out of their way to sponsor several Chinatown events and Chinese American cultural events.
I think Tufts now is largely seen as a good neighbor. They support things like the Rice Sticks and Tea Food Pantry.
Tufts has been here, they're a neighbor. They try to be supportive, and we work with them. When our practice space was under renovation, we had no place to go. We were actually able to work with Tufts where they gave us practice space, so that was wonderful.
I'm Diana Richardson, Chief Operating Officer at Tufts Medical Center. I'm delighted and honored to be here.
Although Tufts wasn't the only of what could be considered a controversial real estate project in the neighborhood. A very tall and a very luxury condominium/apartment building was shoved right into the center of the neighborhood. It'd be one thing if the rents here would be on par with other buildings in the neighborhood, but that's not happening.
Today, my tour guests looked at a flyer and they said, oh my God, that price. Like, we couldn't afford to live here. This is a community that people don't realize. It's not just the restaurants and a commercial activity, but if you look one story up from all of those restaurants, those were apartments where people live. I think it would be a real shame if we lost our Chinatown residents because they couldn't afford to live here anymore.
So Chinatown's actual livable area today is significantly smaller and significantly noisier, which almost necessitates the Leather District to exist as a residential area.
There's more affordable housing being developed, but not nearly enough to meet the need.
I think people live here, they must like Chinese culture a lot, and they can absolutely bear all the noises and all the trees and traffic here.
2 years ago, there was a study tested the air quality across Massachusetts, and they found that this neighborhood, Chinatown neighborhood specifically, has the worst air quality in the entire Commonwealth.
The amount of noise, air pollution, and even the shadows cast from all the tall buildings is sort of a problem unique to Chinatown as far as the downtown neighborhoods of Boston are concerned.
You know, once people begin to make it here and then they move out to Malden and Quincy and to other places. Those spaces have now become very vibrant too, thanks to the immigrant population and the children of immigrants, and that's wonderful.
The consolidation of Chinatown forced residents out of the city but not out of the state. Satellite Chinatowns have since popped up in Dorchester and Allston, as well as neighboring cities like Quincy and Malden. Today, the city of Quincy actually has the highest population of Asian American residents in Boston, but That's kind of far. We're going to talk about Quincy later. Much of this came from new immigration, actually, but there were a good amount of people who were from Chinatown that were forcefully displaced and forced to move to the whims of the government.
We are still getting new immigrant families coming in. The hard part is the housing has gone up so much. The prices have priced out a lot of families. So we have families that are moving out to places like Quincy, Malden, where there's small enclaves of China. Quincy's pretty big, but Malden's kind of smaller.
I'm living in Malden for almost 2 years. I love it there. There are a lot of Chinese people there. It's not so crowded. It's like a perfect mix for me with the American culture and Chinese culture.
Chinatown is mostly apolitical. Culturally, residents did not see much of a reason to vote here. However, younger generations of the neighborhood have been attempting to change that.
I think Chinatown has recognized in recent times that they can't be silent. Culturally, going to authorities or challenging authority would have been essentially a life-threatening act to do. And so there's a lot of reasons why Chinese were not necessarily vocally opponents. In communist China, it could get you killed or disappeared. We have had advocates in Chinatown who have been quite vocal. Mary Sue Hu, for whom part of that park was named, she was a vocal advocate for affordable housing in Chinatown, for getting some of the seedier businesses out of Chinatown, and so forth. We have had pretty vocal advocates, and contrary to what a lot of people think, a lot of them have been women. Their history is probably not shared as widely as it should be.
Unfortunately, in this country, silence equals compliance. At first, there was Tufts Medical. That was the first strike, but there are benefits to having a great big hospital so close to your neighborhood. But then there was the Mass Pike and the luxury condos. And, well, as we discussed in the Bay Village video, the Theater District was once the combat zone, a premier area for vice and belligerents within the city.
Depending on who you talk to, some of the older Chinese will say, it wasn't that bad, we got to go to the movies cheap. Really, it was not good for the neighborhood. It displaced businesses and families.
The city wanted to pick one neighborhood to isolate all of its vices to attempt to control them. And Chinatown's close proximity to the Theater District, where the combat zone ended up sprouting up, proved to make it the ideal sacrificial lamb.
It was a reflection of their value of Chinatown at that time. We'll just throw all of it there. It brought a seedy element and persona to Chinatown.
This created a disturbance for people who just wanted to live here, as night turned to day and the party went on.
Some people have nice enough memories of growing up around that. I don't think it's ideal, and it wasn't their choice. The tendency in a lot of older Chinese especially is to, why complain about we can change it? Where there's political clout, where there's money, people are not going to put those kinds of businesses.
From its inception to the modern day, Chinatown has mostly been left to self-govern by local authorities, boasting a culture that was so unique to that of the West. Gambling took place in Chinatown more so than other neighborhoods. In fact, it was the only neighborhood where it was really considered de facto legal. Local authorities did not see a problem with the gambling that took place in the neighborhood, as the games did remain mostly peaceful. The one exception to this is unfortunately the most notorious one. One snowy January night, in a gambling den run in the basement of 85 Tyler Street, 1991, 3 individuals forcefully entered, immediately shooting one man dead, before lining up 4 others and shooting them all point blank in the back of the head, execution style. Only one man managed to survive his wounds, managing to drag himself to the street and beg for help. This incident would go on to be known as the Chinatown Massacre. The motivation for this was never made clear, but sources can trace the 3 gunmen back to Stephen C., the Sky Dragon, leader of the former Chinatown gang, the 14K Triad. C had been jailed in the 1980s and had lost control of Chinatown to other gangs in the area. One of the rival gangs was led by Dai Kyung, who had previously survived an attempt at his life in the form of a drive-by at the Chinatown gates, but later met his end at 85 Tyler Street as one of the victims of the massacre. Although nothing has proven it, there is suspicion that Sky Dragon ordered this hit to finally take out Kyung, and because of this, he's now behind bars with 2 of the 3 gunmen of the Chinatown Massacre. And as of this video's creation in 2022, the 3rd gunman has never been caught. Altercations like this would often be used to justify the act of gentrification, but what's ignored often in these arguments is the areas they seek to gentrify are typically nurtured by the environment that the city puts them in. Easy example, the combat zone was directly next to Chinatown and heavily aided in the seedier nature of the neighborhood around the 20th century.
You feel like Chinatown is generally a safe area?
I'll give it 3.5 out of 5.
Okay, out of 5. I thought you were gonna say 10.
When I first moved here, people told me, don't go through Chinatown, it's not safe. Every other city I'd been in was lively and active at night. When I walked through the financial district of Boston at night, it's dead. And I said, I am walking through Chinatown. There's businesses there, there's lights on, there's people on the street. It's much safer.
And today, Chinatown has unfortunately faced extreme discrimination due to the obvious.
The community definitely has suffered during the pandemic. It's hit this community particularly hard for a lot of reasons that have to do with the immigrant nature of the community.
Another reason I don't really want to live in Chinatown is that I've seen some news about racial harassment in Chinatown.
We have people who have lost loved ones. We have people who have been sick. Seniors who are afraid to go out of their house, going hungry in their own homes, either because they didn't want to get sick or they didn't want to get attacked.
I wouldn't choose to live here.
2020 onward proved as a difficult time for Chinatown and for the Asian American population of America. After the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan, China, a distrust and disdain for the Chinese people grew within the United States. Funny thing is, Boston's coronavirus outbreak didn't actually start in Chinatown. It, of all things, actually started at the wealthy waterfront district during a meeting of health officials. In spite of this, the origin of the virus led to the discrimination of the Asian American population of Boston, and the businesses of Chinatown suffered as a result.
They tend not to report it to the Boston police. The feeling is you don't go to authority because you did that in China, you would disappear, and also nothing's going to be done. You can't sit in your office and say, I don't care about your immigration status. If you get assaulted, I want you to come talk to me.
I truly feel sorry for those people who had gone through any of this.
Restaurants that were broken into more than one time. Tom attacked on the street and carjacked. Toyuan was broken into. They had at knife point their tip jar taken. So somebody came and gave her a whistle. You can't ask a 70-year-old woman to rely on blowing a whistle when she's got a knife pointed at her.
Are violence and harassment related violations?
Chinatown is in the middle of the city with expansion, congestion, and housing shortage problems.
Acts of violence have become a part of daily life.
We have a lot to worry about.
Chinatown is really a community that depends upon a lot of very special public services.
Beating them up is just making it worse.
There's more freedom here than over there.
Is the freedom worth it, considering the trouble you've had?
Yes.
Every person my age, or even older than me, is an immigrant who came here from a foreign country. That's all they're doing. They're just immigrants coming from a foreign country and want to live in a new country.
Do you Cambodian children want to be friends with American children? Yes, I do.
I chose to move to Chinatown when I started a family. Mm-hmm. For me, it was because I'm Chinese, and I wanted my children to grow up in a space where they're not a minority, where they're not one or two kids in school, and where the language can be heard and spoken, and it's easier for them to learn the Chinese language. And so I find that it's a wonderful place to start a family. There are also a couple of really good schools here, and it's a community.
Yeah.
It really is a community. You get a sense of a community here.
Taking a picture of the community?
Taking a picture of the mural.
The mural.
Yeah.
You know, we are so angry about these people.
The
cars? A beautiful mural, you know, see what they did in the bottom?
Oh, the graffiti.
The graffiti, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
It's a really nice mural. Why are they?
It is. That's why we were so angry about that.
I understand why. That's terrible.
It is. We thought we'd do the mural here. They wouldn't do that, but they still come into.
They still come in and tag and just write stupid stuff all over.
Chinatown today isn't what Chinatown was. It's shrunken down, it's louder, it's noisier, it's dirtier than what it was when it was founded. But the influence of Asian culture and Asian people in the city of Boston has spread far beyond the purviews of Chinatown.
Do you feel the city of Boston has been welcoming to Chinatown?
I think so. Chinatown is playing an important part in Boston because there are so many international students and all the business people here.
I didn't grow up in Chinatown. I live in Chinatown, but I grew up in Penang, Malaysia. It's a very multicultural society. People interact very freely with each other. The food is different, the climate is different. Healthcare is one of the best in the world and very easily accessible. It's not so easy here.
I think we have more Vietnamese. So here's the tricky part. Like Japanese and Korean immigrants maybe come into a church that's in their language and then they move to the suburbs. In general, you don't have on the East Coast at least like a Koreatown or a Japantown. Do you feel like when I go to events in Chinatown, there's more diversity there than there used to be? I think primarily in the younger generations. So when I used to go to those events, it would be me and a handful of other people my age, and then the older generations, all older Cantonese.
Most of the time, I pretty much feel at home, not only in Chinatown, but in Boston overall.
Yeah. Seems like everything I want is never anything I have, and by the time I make a choice, I choose the things that didn't last. I never feel at home when I step inside the door, and I need to go to sleep, but my bed is on the floor in the bathroom. But I don't care anymore, I don't care, all I ever do is stare anymore. I'm in my head, always silence in the air anymore. Wish I was dead, I look around, but you ain't there anymore. You ain't there anymore.
Boston today is more Chinese than ever, and Greater Boston is more Asian than ever. Because as it turns out, having 30-something colleges and some of the best Ivy League schools in the world proved very appealing for international students, and some who choose to live here for the residential scholastic bonuses.
What actually brought you to Boston?
School.
School. That's a very common answer.
Yeah.
I'm here to pursue my master's degree in Northeastern University.
What is your master's in?
Data analytics.
I came here in 1985 to go to law school at Northeastern.
What was it Northeastern?
Harvard Divinity School.
I'm planning to work here with my work visa, trying to apply for a longer term of my work visa.
Yeah.
Just hope that'll work.
The footprint of the Asian American community in Boston and Greater Boston can still be seen today. Well, literally seen today, not only in the satellite Chinatowns of Quincy and Malden, but also in the more affluent neighborhoods like Back Bay, Beacon Hill, or the Seaport. Neighborhoods that were once predominantly white Anglo-Saxon have since diversified to an extreme, as the minority populations we once sought to keep down have risen above despite internal meddling.
What can be done to keep the spirit and culture of Chinatown alive?
Line dancing is definitely just about, celebrating key elements of the culture, remembering it, teaching it, significance, why we do line dance, how it all started. As part of our performance, we often do a teaching as well.
First of all, we have to stop the gentrification. Everybody has a right to buy properties and develop them, but we have to balance the needs of the developers with the needs of the community. Even Chinese landlords are turning their properties over or letting them lie fallow until they go to get a good deal. Nobody wants to talk about that. That's probably not going to make me too popular.
The new Boston mayor, Miss Wu.
Michelle Wu.
Oh, Michelle Wu. I feel like ever since she got elected as the mayor of the city, it's like back to life a lot.
I'm very heartened by the fact that Mayor Wu has been a loud and vocal advocate for more transparency in the Boston Planning Commission. The fact that property values are rising here should be something that we can leverage to the benefit of the community, not just developers.
It's important to have a leader who can embrace the culture, the Asian and Chinese culture. So I think a great leader is important.
I think the most important thing for us is to not assimilate as quickly. Learning the language is really important, and celebrating our culture, our traditions, making sure that we have that, working as a community. To be deeply rooted in it, I think is really important, and to make sure that we keep our language.
Even if everybody became literate in English overnight, that's not going to make jobs happen for them.
People have to really try to fit in. To fit in where they're living and what kind of environment they're in.
Understand how to operate in the bigger culture, but not lose our roots. Because then you forget who you are, you lose yourself.
One thing that gives me hope is we have a lot of active and committed young people. First or second generation here, most of them. Not all of them Chinese, getting actively involved in placemaking and actually creating pockets in Chinatown that are more livable and more community-oriented and serve the community that we live in. Have people who care about Chinatown. We are connected to the Chinatown neighborhood in some way, whether it's through a sense of community, whether it's through the food, whether it's our family and where we live, devoted to making sure the community survives.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that gives me the most hope.
I don't think we're ever going to lose Chinatown, and I don't think we're ever going to see a stop to the spread of Asian culture in the United States and in Boston. However, that doesn't mean we should stop putting up a good fight to preserve this cultural landmark.
When is the next time people can watch you publicly perform?
I think it's July 28th at the Chinatown Gate. Also August 7th at the Marine Industrial Park.
Oh, cool.
I think it's August 7th.
How can people book a Chinatown tour with you?
Right now they can find me via TripAdvisor, or they can find me via Facebook or Gmail. If you Google Boston Chinatown Tours or my name, you'll find it. I'm on all the socials. You can find me on Instagram at JC Craves or Fan Chinatown, Facebook, Jacqueline Church, or Boston Chinatown Tour.
I still plan to go out with a bang. Just because the times change doesn't mean it's not all the same. 6 years ago I was still living under the rain. I figured by now everything would be okay. Can you help me be sane?
Thank you very much. It's nice to meet you, Jackie.
No problem.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Chen?
Chen.
Never lose your culture, Chinatown. I'm Ryanstorm.
Been stuck in my mind since the times have been tough. I'm a mess, can you clean me up?